Okay, I'm recording for my safety. I'm in the parking lot at the plaza, and this woman is blocking my car.
Don't come near me! Stop threatening me!
You're blocking the exit.
Somebody help! She's trying to attack me!
Imani was trying to go home. Instead, she got pinned in by a stranger who decided she wasn't going anywhere. A white woman blocked her car, called the police like it was a weapon, and started performing fear for anyone watching. While Imani did the only smart thing, she made sure the truth was on record. Because here's the thing about moments like this. The person who stays calm doesn't always win in real time. The person with the better story does. And in that parking lot, somebody was already writing a story out loud. Now, before we rewind, comment where you're watching from, your city or state. And if you're into stories where accountability only happens because someone stayed level-headed and kept receipts, hit like and subscribe. These situations happen fast and the details matter. All right, let's back up. Imani Brooks wasn't a loud person. Early 30s, steady job, the kind of woman who handled business and kept moving. She didn't go looking for conflict, and she wasn't interested in proving herself to strangers in public. But she did have one rule she lived by. If something felt off, she documented it. Not because she was paranoid, because she'd seen how quick off could turn into official. That day started normal. A busy shopping plaza, midday traffic, people circling for spots like it was a competition. The lot had that constant hum, engines crawling, shopping carts rattling. Somebody always half stopped in the lane with their blinker on like that meant they owned the pavement. Imani ran in for a quick errand and came back out already thinking about her next stop. She wasn't distracted, though. She noticed details. She noticed who was rushing, who was impatient, who was cutting corners. And she noticed the white woman before anything even happened, because the woman's energy didn't match the moment. Not lost, not wandering, not looking for her car. Looking at Imani. At first, it read like the usual parking lot attitude. The little stare that people do when they want you to feel like you're in their way. Imani didn't bite. She got into her car like any other person would, shut the door, and took a breath before pulling out. That should have been the end of it. But the woman made it something else. She stepped into the lane behind Imani's car, not crossing through, stopping there, like she was placing herself in the path on purpose. And then her SUV rolled into position too, angled just enough to block the exit without fully ramming in. It was calculated. A move meant to trap, not crash. Imani paused, trying to process the logic. People honked over less. People screamed over less. But physically blocking someone from leaving? That wasn't just rude, that was a control. And control was the whole point. The woman didn't act embarrassed. She didn't wave it off like she'd made a mistake. She acted like she had authority, like she was doing something justified, and everybody else needed to accept it. Imani stayed inside the car. That choice mattered. She didn't give the woman a scene. She didn't give her closeness. She didn't give her a frame where the story could become, I felt threatened. Instead, Imani reached for her phone and started recording. Not dramatically, not for attention, like someone making a record because she could already see where this was headed. The woman started talking, loud enough for nearby people to hear. She framed herself as the one who needed help. She insisted police were on the way. She repeated that she needed them there immediately, like repeating it made her decision more legitimate. And then came the performance. The part that wasn't about facts. It was about roles. The woman kept presenting herself as afraid, even while she stayed planted behind Imani's car, even while she refused to move, even while she escalated the tension and drew an audience. That contradiction is what made Imani's stomach drop, because Imani knew how that script worked. If police arrived to a scene where a white woman was loudly claiming fear and a black woman was frustrated, the public often didn't ask who started it. They asked who looked like the problem. The story could become dangerous in seconds, especially if there wasn't proof. So Imani stayed calm on purpose. She didn't plead. She didn't insult. She didn't match the woman's volume. She described what was happening like it was going into evidence. She kept it simple. She was being blocked. She was trying to leave. She needed the woman to move her vehicle. And you could feel, even in the way the bystanders reacted, that something wasn't sitting right. People weren't rushing to help the woman who was claiming fear. They were watching the woman who was blocking a car, like she owned the exit. A guy with a cart slowed down and hovered. A couple near the storefront stopped and pretended to check their bags while they listened. Someone across the row lifted a phone, not to take a selfie, but to capture what looked like a situation that might flip. And in the middle of that parking lot, it started turning into a public record. The woman kept warning Imani about consequences without saying the word out loud. She kept acting like any movement towards her car would be an attack, even though she was the one holding the exit hostage. She kept setting the stage for what she planned to tell officers when they got there. Imani didn't let her have that stage uncontested. She kept her tone controlled and her wording precise. She treated it like a chess match. Every sentence was a piece moved carefully, so it couldn't be twisted later. Every calm moment was a shield. The woman didn't just block Imani in and stand there quietly. She worked the moment. She kept her voice loud enough to travel, the way people did when they wanted witnesses before they wanted facts. She made sure anyone walking past heard the same message on repeat. Police were coming, police needed to handle it. She wasn't moving until they arrived. And then she added the ingredient that always changed how strangers reacted. She started presenting herself as afraid. Not afraid in a private, believable way. Afraid in a public, performative way. The kind of fear that wasn't about safety, it was about positioning. The kind of fear that turned a person into the victim before anyone even knew what happened. Imani clocked it immediately. That's why she didn't yell back. She didn't trade insults. She didn't get out of the car and give the situation a physical frame. She stayed seated, window cracked just enough to be heard, phone up, and she kept describing the reality in plain language. Her exit was blocked. She was being prevented from leaving, and she was asking to go. It sounded boring on purpose. Boring is hard to twist. The blocker didn't like that. She tried a different tactic. Bait. She edged closer to Imani's driver's side window, acting like she wanted a face-to-face argument. She talked over Imani's words, tried to turn it into a back and forth. She kept looking around between sentences like she was checking to see who was watching and what they believed. Imani didn't step into it. She kept forcing the same simple question into the air. If the woman was truly scared, why was she the one trapping someone in a parking lot? Why was she still standing there instead of moving away? Why was the fear only showing up as soon as police were mentioned? That question did something. It made the performance wobble. Because suddenly, the woman had to hold two stories at the same time. She was terrified, but she was also the one choosing to stay, choose to block, choose to control. And the more Imani kept that contradiction on record, the more uncomfortable the crowd got. A guy loading groceries into a trunk slowed down and kept watching. A woman with earbuds took one out and didn't put it back. The student across the row, Zoe, quietly angled her phone and started filming from a distance without saying a word. She didn't want attention. She wanted proof. That second camera mattered more than anyone realized, because the blocker started testing boundaries. She warned Imani not to come near her SUV. She framed the SUV like it was sacred property, and framed Imani like she was already guilty of something she hadn't done. She made it clear that if Imani got out, if she took a step, if she moved wrong, she was ready to say it was an attack. It was preloaded, like she'd rehearsed the line. Imani didn't flinch. She answered the way somebody answered when they understood the real danger wasn't the parking lot. It was the police report. She told the woman in a flat, almost tired way that blocking someone's car and refusing to let them leave wasn't just rude, it was illegal. And when officers got there, the person who set this up was going to be the one in trouble. That's when the blocker's tone sharpened. She didn't back off. She didn't move her vehicle even a foot. Instead, she started threatening consequences again, without saying exactly what she meant. It was the same message over and over. Don't test me. Don't come close. Don't try anything. And right there, you could see the chess game. Imani was playing defense with facts and distance. The blocker was playing offense with implication. It wasn't even about Imani anymore. It was about control, about proving she could hold a stranger in place and make the system show up on her terms. A nearby employee, Mr. Patel, from one of the storefronts, finally walked over. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just cautious, like he didn't want to be the next target in somebody's story. He asked what was going on and looked from the SUV to Imani's car, then back to the woman. The blocker tried to pull him into her narrative, repeating that she was waiting for police and that she felt threatened. But Mr. Patel did what a lot of people do when they can see a situation with their own eyes. He didn't argue feelings. He pointed at reality. He asked why. If she was scared, she was standing there and keeping someone from leaving. He told her she needed to move her car and let the driver out, and the blocker didn't like hearing that from him, because it hit different when it wasn't the angry black woman saying it. Imani noticed that too. She didn't celebrate it, and she just kept filming, kept her voice steady, kept repeating the same request, kept building a clean timeline. She wanted to exit. The other driver refused. The crowd was now watching it happen. That's when the blocker tried her most dangerous move. She started acting like the recording itself was the problem. She told Imani to stop filming. She spoke about the phone like it was harassment, like evidence was aggression. But in 2025, in a parking lot full of strangers, that demand didn't land like she thought it would. It landed like guilt. Zoe's camera stayed up. Another person across the lane lifted theirs too. It wasn't a mob. It wasn't chaos. It was oversight. And the blocker felt it. So she got louder. She kept returning to the same script. Police were coming. She needed them now. She was afraid, while still refusing to move the SUV even an inch. The contradiction got sharper each time she repeated it. Imani's tone never changed. That was the flex. She stayed in the car. She stayed composed. She stayed factual. And when the blocker threw out another warning about what would happen if Imani got near the SUV, Imani delivered the line that made a few bystanders glance at each other like, yeah, she's right. Imani told her she was the one about to end up in jail. Not as a threat, as a prediction. Because at that point, it wasn't just Imani's word against hers. It was on camera, from more than one angle. And the parking lot had stopped being a private dispute. It had become a public record, waiting for officers to arrive and decide who they believed. When the police pulled into the plaza, the whole dynamic shifted, because now it wasn't just a parking lot standoff. It was a race to be believed first. The woman who'd blocked Imani in immediately tried to take control of the conversation. She positioned herself as the one needing help, leaned hard into the idea that she felt threatened, and talked with the kind of urgency that made strangers assume there had to be a reason. Imani didn't compete for drama. She stayed measured and kept everything anchored to one fact. She had been prevented from leaving. She explained it as a timeline, not an argument. How she tried to exit, how her path was blocked, how she asked repeatedly to be let go, and how the other woman refused, while insisting police were the solution. That difference mattered, because officers heard fear claims all the time. But they also recognized when someone was trying to steer the outcome before anyone looked at the actual scene. And this scene was simple if you weren't distracted. One car was trapped, one car was positioned to keep it that way, and a crowd had gathered because it didn't look normal. What the blocker didn't expect was that Imani wasn't alone in documenting it. Bystanders had been watching. At least one person had filmed from a second angle. A nearby employee had seen enough to speak up. The situation had witnesses who weren't invested in either person's ego, only in what they saw. So when the blocker tried to switch the focus to accusations and consequences, it didn't land the way it usually did. Too many people had already seen the setup. And the moment that really broke her momentum was when the recording became part of the conversation. Because once an officer asked to see what had been captured, the dispute stopped being about who sounded more convincing. It became about what actually happened. Imani's video showed the part that mattered most. She stayed contained. She tried to leave. She kept asking for space. And the other woman used her vehicle and the threat of police as leverage to keep control. It undercut the "I was terrified" act in the simplest way possible. It made the contradiction visible. After that, the officer's tone changed. Not dramatic, not emotional, just more specific, more procedural, more focused on the fact that blocking someone from leaving wasn't a normal disagreement. It was a choice. And with witnesses backing up what the video showed, the blocker's strategy started collapsing in real time. By the end of the interaction, Imani wasn't scrambling to defend herself anymore. She was just letting the record speak. The woman who came in expecting to run the situation with fear and authority was now stuck explaining why she created it in the first place. Once the officer had the basic picture, the standoff stopped being a "he said, she said" situation and turned into a paperwork situation, the kind that doesn't care about performance. The first thing that changed was control. The officer directed the blocker to move her vehicle and clear the exit, not as a suggestion, as an instruction. And when she hesitated, still trying to hold on to that last bit of power, the officer's tone got sharper, the way it did when someone kept resisting a simple, lawful order in public. Imani stayed put until it was handled. She didn't peel off the second she had space, because she understood what leaving too quickly could look like. She did the opposite of what the blocker expected. She stayed calm and stayed available, like someone who had nothing to hide. Then came the part that mattered more than the argument ever did: statements. The officer separated people and started collecting names and quick summaries. A store employee confirmed what he saw. A bystander confirmed they filmed from a different angle. The crowd that had formed wasn't a cheering section. It was a record. And that's what changed the outcome. Because now the blocker couldn't rely on tone and tears alone. She had to match the timeline. And she couldn't. She tried to pivot. She tried to make it about feeling unsafe. She tried to make the phone recording sound like provocation. She tried to act like the whole thing was an accident or a misunderstanding. But there's a problem with using a car as a weapon and then calling it fear. Vehicles don't accidentally trap someone at that angle, and witnesses don't accidentally see you refuse to move for several minutes. The officer's questions narrowed. They got less emotional and more mechanical. Why she placed her SUV there. Why she didn't simply let the other driver leave. Why she insisted on police while also claiming she was afraid. And why she escalated it in front of a crowd. And when the blocker's answers kept slipping into vague accusations instead of facts, the officer treated it like what it was: disorderly behavior that created a public disturbance, plus a deliberate act that restricted another person's movement. That's when consequences started showing up. Not a dramatic movie arrest scene, not a big speech, just real-world accountability. Warnings turning into citations, refusal turning into documentation, a situation being recorded in a way that followed the blocker after the parking lot. Imani walked away from that moment with something most people never get in situations like this: confirmation on the record that she was the one who tried to leave, not the one who tried to control. She didn't win because she shouted louder. She won because she stayed disciplined long enough for the truth to get captured by more than one camera. And the blocker, she left without the victory she came for. She didn't get to keep Imani trapped. She didn't get a clean story where she was the hero. And now she had an officer, witnesses, and multiple videos attached to her name. In other words, the parking lot ended, but the accountability didn't. Within hours, the video was everywhere. It didn't need captions to make sense. People could see the setup: one person trying to leave, one person using a car, and a police call to control the moment. And once the clip hit social media, the comments all circled the same point: This wasn't fear, it was strategy. Commentators broke it down like a pattern, weaponizing panic, using police as leverage, and trying to flip the story the second things didn't go her way. The phrase, classic Karen, came up fast. But the real takeaway was sharper than a label. If Imani hadn't recorded, the story could have gone the other way. And that's what made it stick. Not the drama. The reminder that cameras are sometimes the only reason the truth survives the first version of events. After the parking lot cleared, the real consequences didn't happen in the moment. They happened in the follow-up. Because once multiple videos existed, the blocker couldn't quietly re-explain what happened later. The timeline was locked. The witnesses were real. And the claim of fear didn't match the behavior that started everything. Using a vehicle to restrict someone's movement and refusing to let them leave. In the days that followed, what started as a public standoff turned into official steps. Reports got reviewed with footage attached. The store management got involved because the incident happened on their property and drew a crowd. And the blocker, who had tried to turn the police into a pressure tactic, ended up dealing with the kind of accountability that doesn't disappear when the cameras stop. Citations, restrictions from the plaza, and the possibility of further legal trouble if she doubled down with false claims. Imani, on the other hand, walked away with something most people don't get after a situation like that. Validation on record. Not just, she said, but proof that she stayed controlled and tried to leave while someone else escalated. And that changed her afterward. Not in some dramatic movie way, just in the quiet way real people change when they realize something important. You can be calm, you can be polite, and someone can still try to turn you into a threat if it benefits them. The answer isn't to become louder. The answer is to become prepared. That's the lesson here. Power doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes power looks like blocking a car, calling the police, and performing fear to make the system arrive, already leaning your way. And accountability doesn't always look like instant justice. Sometimes accountability looks like a phone held steady, a timeline stated clearly, witnesses who don't look away, and a record that makes it impossible for a lie to become the official version. So let me ask you, what would you have done if you were Imani? Would you have stayed in the car and recorded? Or would you have gotten out and risked giving someone the moment they wanted? And have you ever seen somebody try to use fear like a weapon in public? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more story times like this. Because the next situation could happen to anyone, and the receipts are what protect you.
Ma'am, don't make this harder. Just hand it over.
Sir, I paid for my groceries. You can check the receipt.
We'll see about that.
Hey! Unbelievable.
So imagine this. It's a Wednesday evening, nothing special, nothing dramatic. You've just gotten off work, you're tired, and the only thing on your mind is getting home, changing into something comfortable, and cooking dinner. You run into a grocery store for a quick stop, planning to grab a few ingredients and get out. That's all you want. A normal, quiet, boring shopping trip. But instead, 20 minutes later, you're standing at the front of the store with a circle of strangers staring at you. Your personal bag is dumped out on the floor. Your wallet, your keys, your lip balm, your charger, even a stray receipt you didn't know was in there. Scattered everywhere. And the man who dumped it all, the employee who grabbed your bag without permission, is still pointing at you like you're a criminal. Even though he found absolutely nothing. Not an apple, not a candy bar, nothing. That was Maya Thompson's night. A simple grocery run turned into a viral battle for her dignity. Before we dive deeper, where are y'all watching from? The whole thing started so small. Too small, honestly, for what it turned into. Maya walked into Fairway Market right after work. Still in her scrubs, still wearing her badge. Still with that half-exhausted, half-relieved feeling you get at the end of a long shift. She didn't look suspicious. She didn't act suspicious. She didn't feel suspicious. She just wanted pasta. She grabbed a basket, popped in one earbud, and headed straight for produce. She picked up tomatoes, checked a few for ripeness, put one back because it was squishy, grabbed basil, and kept moving. Normal, uneventful. Except someone else was watching her like she was the main act of a crime documentary. Mr. Callahan, 54, salt and pepper mustache. Been working there longer than most employees were alive. He had that I can spot trouble from a mile away swagger, the kind that wasn't confidence. It was entitlement. And the moment he saw Maya, he locked onto her like she was already a suspect. He followed her from produce to dry goods to the pasta aisle. Every time she paused, he paused. Every time she put something in her basket, he squinted like he was analyzing evidence. At one point, Maya stepped aside to answer a text from her sister. She slipped her personal bag onto her shoulder while holding her basket in the other hand. That was when Callahan decided he had caught her. By the time she made it to self-checkout, he had built a whole fictional backstory in his head. She was hiding items. She was acting nervous. She was checking her phone too much. She had a bag big enough to hide something in, which, by the way, was just a regular purse. Nothing fancy, nothing oversized, just a bag. Maya scanned everything. She bagged everything. She paid. She took her receipt, and she headed for the exit. 2 steps from the door, 2 steps. Callahan rushed in front of her, blocking the path like a linebacker. "Ma'am," he said loud enough for the people in line to hear, "I'm going to need you to open your bag." Maya blinked. "Sorry, why?" "You didn't scan everything. You put items in your purse." She felt her stomach drop. "I didn't put anything in my purse," she said calmly. Callahan folded his arms. "Ma'am, don't make this harder. Just hand it over." A couple customers turned their heads. Maya clutched her bag strap. "Sir, I paid for my groceries. You can check the receipt." He didn't want the receipt. He grabbed the strap of her bag before she could even react. "Hey!" Maya exclaimed. Callahan yanked it off her shoulder and held it up like a trophy. "If you're innocent, you won't mind," he announced. Then, right there in front of everyone, he flipped Maya's bag upside down and dumped everything on the floor. Keys, wallet, lip balm, earbuds, a hair tie, phone charger. It all scattered across the tile with a loud clatter. A woman at the nearest register gasped. Another person muttered, "What the?" Maya's face burned. And Callahan? He crouched down and sifted through her things with the confidence of someone certain he'd find stolen goods. Except he didn't, because there were none. He stood up slowly, confused. Then, instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "She hid it," he said. "She passed it to someone else. I know what I saw." That line, "I know what I saw," would later become infamous. Because the only thing he saw was his own bias. A nearby shopper, Jordan White, pulled out their phone and started recording. Callahan didn't care. "You're not leaving this store," he told Maya, still blocking the exit. "Not until we get to the bottom of this." Maya steadied her voice. "Get the manager." Lena, the teen cashier who had witnessed everything, looked terrified but finally spoke up. I saw her scan everything." Callahan snapped. "Stay out of this." But it was too late. People were watching. And that was the moment. The exact moment. Things shifted. The store manager, Mr. Patel, came hurrying down the front aisle like he'd just heard someone yell, "Clean up in aisle 5." Except this cleanup was about to be a whole PR disaster. He saw Maya's belongings scattered across the floor first. Then he saw Callahan standing in front of her like a nightclub bouncer. "What is happening here?" Patel asked, already sounding overwhelmed. Callahan didn't miss a beat. "She stole items," he barked. "I caught her hiding things in her purse. I emptied it. She's trying to leave. I need you to call the police." The words hit Maya like a punch. She stepped forward. "I didn't steal anything. You can see everything he dumped out of my bag. Nothing from this store is in there." Jordan chimed in, camera still up. "I've been recording since he took her bag. She didn't steal anything. He just dumped her stuff for no reason." Lena, the cashier, lifted her hand halfway like a kid at school. "She scanned everything," she added quietly. I watched her. Callahan shot her a look sharp enough to cut glass. Patel rubbed his forehead. He looked at the bag contents, then at Maya, then at Callahan. Let's check the cameras, he said finally. Callahan scoffed. We don't need cameras. I saw her steal. Patel cut him off. We're checking the cameras. Maya kept her composure, but her breath trembled slightly as she picked up her things from the ground. Jordan moved with her, handing her items carefully, before following her towards the back office, still recording. Patel brought up the footage. They went aisle by aisle, transaction by transaction, and it was all there. Maya picking up items, Maya scanning them, Maya paying, Maya putting groceries into the store-provided bag. Maya's purse never even opening the entire time. There wasn't a single moment, not one, where she did anything even close to suspicious. Patel's face turned pale. Callahan's face turned red. Maya stayed silent. When the footage ended, Jordan whispered, "Wow, just wow." Patel sighed deeply. Callahan, she didn't take anything. Callahan's jaw clenched. He pointed at the screen like the footage was lying to him. She must have done something off camera. I know what I saw. These people. He didn't even finish the sentence because everyone in that room knew where he was going and who he meant by these people. Jordan caught the entire thing on video. Patel held up a hand. That's enough. Callahan, step outside. Callahan slammed the office door on the way out. Maya swallowed a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. Patel finally turned to her. I'm truly sorry. This shouldn't have happened. But Maya's eyes said what she couldn't. An apology doesn't make this disappear. She gathered her things and left. Jordan walked with her out of the store. As soon as they stepped onto the sidewalk, Jordan spoke. Listen, this is going to sound weird, but would you be okay if I posted the video? Maya hesitated. She didn't want attention. She didn't want drama, but she did want truth. She wanted accountability. She wanted what happened to be seen, not buried. She nodded. Post it. And Jordan did. That night, the video hit 200K views, 500K views. By morning, it was everywhere. People were outraged. Fire him. Callahan needs consequences. Why did he dump her bag like that? This is textbook profiling. Protect Maya. Reporters messaged. Creators stitched the video. The hashtag #shopping while black trended for hours. Maya woke up to a phone full of notifications, messages from coworkers, and about 48 missed calls from unknown numbers. The truth was out. But the fight? The fight was just beginning. By the time Maya got to work the next morning, her phone was blowing up so much she had to silence it. People she hadn't talked to in years were messaging her. Girl, is this you? Please tell me you're okay. I saw the video. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Her coworkers whispered the moment she walked into the break room. One of them hugged her. Another just shook her head and said, That man is done. Maya felt a mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. Yes, the truth was out there now. But the humiliation, the anger, the memory of her belongings scattered on a dirty grocery store floor, that didn't go away overnight. Around lunchtime, she got a message that made her stop breathing for a second. Hi, Maya. My name is Sandra Lee. I'm a civil rights attorney. I'd like to speak with you about what happened. Maya stared at the message. She knew that name. Sandra had handled cases involving discrimination, wrongful detention, workplace bias. She was legit. Not one of those, call me if you slipped in aisle 4 lawyers, she responded. They met that same evening. Sandra didn't waste time. She'd seen Jordan's video. She'd watched it multiple times, and she was fired up. Maya, she said, leaning forward, what he did was unlawful. Dumping your purse? That's a violation of your personal property, blocking your exit? That's unlawful detention. Accusing you publicly without proof? That's defamation. And the racial profiling is obvious. Maya nodded slowly. I don't want drama. Sandra gave a small smile. Drama already found you. What happens next is about justice. They filed 3 actions. 1. A complaint with the grocery company's corporate office. 2. A civil rights complaint with the state. 3. A lawsuit for damages. Within 48 hours, local news picked up the story. Within 72 hours, national outlets had it. Maya didn't want to be a symbol. She didn't want to be trending. But suddenly people everywhere were talking about her case. Some customers even came forward anonymously saying, "Callahan has done stuff like this before." Oh yes, that was a whole thing. The grocery chain tried to get ahead of the scandal by releasing a PR statement full of corporate buzzwords. "We value our customers. We take this seriously. We're conducting an internal review." But then, the receipts started coming out, literal and metaphorical. During discovery, Sandra obtained employee reports and HR logs. Guess what they showed? Callahan had accused several other customers, mostly black or brown, of stealing in the past. And not once did he have proof. Not once did security footage confirm anything. Not once did corporate discipline him beyond a verbal warning. When Sandra presented that pattern to the court, the judge raised an eyebrow so high it could have jumped off her face. Callahan took the stand looking like he wished he could melt through the floor. He tried to defend himself. "I know what I saw. She was acting suspicious." Sandra questioned him with surgical precision. "Did you see her take anything?" "No." "Did the camera show her taking anything?" "No." "Did her bag contain anything from the store?" "No." "Then on what basis did you publicly accuse her of theft?" He had no answer, just stuttering and anger simmering under the surface. Then came the video. Jordan's footage was played on a large screen in the courtroom. Every second of Callahan grabbing Maya's purse, dumping her belongings, finding nothing, doubling down anyway, saying "people like her" out loud, blocking her from leaving. The judge didn't need hours. She didn't even need half a day. She ruled in Maya's favor on all counts: emotional distress, public humiliation, defamation, unlawful detention, violation of personal property. The grocery company was ordered to pay a settlement. Callahan was officially fired. The kind of fired where they escort you out and disable your badge before you hit the parking lot. And as part of the settlement, the store was required to implement anti-profiling training, a new policy for detaining suspected shoplifters, a mandatory review process before accusing customers publicly. Maya didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just exhaled, feeling lighter for the first time in weeks. But Callahan? Oh, his downfall was only beginning. People dug up everything. Reviews mentioning the rude older guy who follows customers around. Social media posts from former employees saying he treated certain customers differently. Screenshots of shoppers complaining about the man with the mustache who stalks people. Someone even made a compilation of his worst quotes from the viral video. Another person auto-tuned "I know what I saw" into a remix. Callahan went from grocery employee to internet villain of the week. But the consequences didn't stop with memes. Remember, Callahan wasn't just an employee. He had lived in the community for decades. So when everything came out, neighbors who once waved at him suddenly started ignoring and avoiding him. His reputation was flattened. Parents didn't want him volunteering at school events anymore. Local shops refused to rehire him. Even the neighborhood Facebook group banned him after he made a defensive rant about false accusations. The irony, huh? With all the coverage online, every hiring manager who Googled him saw the viral video and dozens of comments saying he always targeted minorities. No one wanted to take that kind of risk. He applied at another grocery chain. Rejected. He applied at a home improvement store. Rejected. Fast food places. Rejected. One manager even told him bluntly, "We can't hire someone who publicly humiliated a customer." The deeper consequences came later. People reported that Callahan became withdrawn, angry, bitter, pacing his apartment late at night, always muttering that he didn't deserve this. But here's the twist. He still didn't believe he was wrong. He told anyone who would listen that Maya had gotten away with something, even when the court ruled against him. He clung to his own imagination instead of the truth, and that stubborn refusal to face reality is what ruined his life more than anything else. For weeks, Maya had been carrying around this invisible weight, the humiliation, the anger, the shock of being treated like a criminal for simply shopping. Even after winning the lawsuit, the viral attention, the apology emails, and the massive online support, her body still remembered everything. Healing is an instant, but slowly, quietly, life started to shift back into place. One evening, Maya sat at her parents' house, sipping tea at the kitchen table. Her mom slid a hand across the table and squeezed hers gently. "You know," her mom said softly, "I've had similar things happen to me. I just never told you." Maya looked up surprised. Her mom nodded. "Different decade, same assumptions." A pause. "But I'm proud of you. You didn't let them walk over you." For the first time since the incident, Maya let herself cry. Not out of sadness, but out of release. Eventually, life settled into a new rhythm. She wasn't that woman in the video anymore. She was Maya, sister, daughter, coworker, friend. What happened didn't define her, but it did shape her. She was stronger now, more sure of herself, less willing to shrink for anyone. And she promised herself this: if she ever saw someone else going through what she went through, she wouldn't hesitate to step in, just like Jordan did for her. Because sometimes justice starts with a single person hitting record. The main lesson from Maya's case is clear. She was accused because of racial bias, not because of anything she actually did. Nothing in her behavior suggested theft. The only thing that made her a suspect in Callahan's mind was the fact that she was a black woman shopping alone. The only reason the situation escalated is because Callahan made assumptions tied directly to her race. But everyone deserves equal treatment, and no one should be accused or singled out because of the color of their skin.
Oh, don't put your stuff there yet!
Sir, my items aren't near yours. Sir, step back. Give her space.
I didn't threaten to hit her!
God bless you, sir.
A white man had a meltdown at a local Fresh Mart outside St. Louis, got up in a black woman's face at self-checkout, and it went viral fast. People didn't share it because it was entertaining. They shared it because it was familiar. One of those moments where someone decided the public space belonged to them, and they expected everyone else to shrink. And in the clip, you could see the exact second it stopped being a checkout dispute and started being about intimidation. Now, before the details, tell me where you're watching from, your city, state, or country. And if you're here for real story times where people keep their dignity and accountability follows, hit like and subscribe. Because the only reason situations like this change is when people stop letting them disappear. Here's what actually happened, in order. It was a typical busy evening in Fresh Mart's self-checkout. The lighting was harsh, the machines were beeping, and everyone moved like they were trying to get out of there without any extra problems. One clerk oversaw multiple kiosks, which meant customers were mostly left to manage themselves, unless something broke or someone got loud. Janelle Rivers walked into that store like thousands of people do every day. Quick trip, basic items, head down, no interest in conflict. She wasn't scanning the room for trouble. She was thinking about dinner the next day and getting home. Keith Mallory was already at a kiosk when she got there. White guy, Cardinals cap. The kind of posture that took up a little extra space on purpose. His transaction finished before hers even started. That part mattered, because the whole argument later tried to pretend the opposite. Keith stayed in the lane. He didn't step over to the side, bagging shelf the way stores expect. He kept bagging right in the station's working area. Slow, deliberate movements, retying bags, rearranging items. sliding things around like he had all night and everyone behind him could wait. That alone wasn't a crime, it was just inconsiderate. The problem was the way he reacted when someone treated the station like it was open, because it was. Janelle stepped up to the kiosk and began placing her items down to start scanning. She didn't touch his cart. She didn't bump him. She didn't shove past him. She simply did what any customer would do when a machine looked available. Keith turned like she'd challenged him. He snapped at her immediately, sharp voice, hard stare, and positioned his body so the space became tighter. He acted like she had disrespected him by moving forward, even though his transaction was already done. And he didn't just complain quietly. He made sure other people could hear, because volume is a tool when you're trying to control a situation. Janelle didn't match the volume. She didn't throw insults. She didn't step into his space. She stayed steady and pointed out the basic reality. He was finished paying, and she was trying to start. Keith rejected that reality and replaced it with his own. He framed it like she was rushing him, cutting him, trying to push him out. He treated a normal checkout moment like it was a personal attack. That's when the clerk, Mia Patel, noticed. Mia had been doing the usual self-checkout sprint, fixing scanner errors, helping with age checks, answering questions people should have asked before they walked in. But Keith's tone wasn't normal frustration. It had that edge that makes employees instantly alert, because it can go from words to danger in a blink. Mia walked over and tried to redirect the moment back into something manageable. She reminded Keith the station needed to keep moving, and asked him to finish bagging at the side shelf. Keith didn't respond like someone being offered a solution. He responded like someone being corrected in public. He raised his voice more, he talked over her, and then he did something that, in hindsight, told everyone exactly where his head was. He started insisting he hadn't threatened Janelle before anyone had even formally accused him of that. He said it like he was planting a flag, like he was writing his defense in real time. But at the same time, he kept crowding. Janelle asked for space. She didn't dramatize it, she didn't beg. She stated it like a boundary that mattered. Keith moved closer anyway. That's how power works in small public conflicts. One person tries to shrink the other without leaving bruises. It's proximity, posture, tone, and pressure, forcing the other person to either retreat or react. And if the other person reacts, the aggressor gets to point and say, "See, that's the problem right there." Janelle didn't react the way he wanted. She stayed controlled. She held her items close, not because she was being petty, but because she clocked what he was doing. She kept her body angled away, enough to avoid contact, but firm enough not to be pushed backward. She focused on the checkout task, refusing to let him turn it into a personal back and forth. That refusal irritated him more. Now the people around them started noticing. You could always tell when a grocery store scene crossed the line from awkward to alarming. Beeps stopped. Carts paused mid-push. Heads turned without fully turning. A couple people gave that quick look toward the front, like they were calculating whether staff would step in or whether they should. And one bystander, Tomas Jenkins, made the decision that changed everything. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Not with big gestures, not with commentary, just a steady lens pointed toward the self-checkouts, capturing what the store cameras would capture too. Keith's receipt already printed, Keith still blocking, Janelle trying to check out, Mia trying to de-escalate, and the way Keith kept leaning in while insisting he wasn't doing anything. Keith noticed the phone almost instantly, and instead of calming down, he got performative. He leaned into the idea that he was being accused unfairly. He repeated his denial louder. He tried to make it look like he was the one under attack, like the crowd and the clerk and the woman beside him were ganging up on him for no reason. That's another control tactic. Turn the lens into proof of your victimhood while continuing the behavior the lens is recording. Mia's posture changed. You could tell she'd shifted from customer service to safety mode. Her hands stayed visible. She stopped trying to win an argument and started trying to prevent a moment she wouldn't be able to undo. Janelle kept her voice level. She didn't escalate. She didn't insult him. She didn't step forward. She just repeated the boundary and tried to continue scanning. Keith still wouldn't move. He stayed planted, making her checkout physically difficult, and he kept talking over both women, as if his voice could dominate the space and force compliance. He was acting like the store's rules didn't apply to him, as long as he refused to acknowledge them. Then the tension sharpened again. Keith's arm shifted toward Janelle's items on the counter. It wasn't a casual gesture. It had purpose. Janelle tightened her grip on what she was holding. Mia's eyes flicked down toward the counter, then back up to Keith's face. And that's when the call went out. Someone, either Mia or another employee, alerted security to self-checkout. The radio crackle wasn't loud, but it landed like a warning. The store had recognized this as more than a customer being upset. It was now a situation with a timeline, witnesses, and cameras, internal and external. Keith didn't seem to realize what that meant yet. Or maybe he did, and he decided to push harder before anyone could stop him. Because right as the bystander's phone stayed steady, right as Mia held her ground, right as Janelle tried to finish the simple act of paying for groceries, Keith moved like he was about to take control of the counter with his hands. Keith didn't calm down. He escalated. What had started as him refusing to clear the bagging space turned into him treating Janelle like she wasn't allowed to stand where she was standing. His voice stayed high, his posture stayed squared, and he kept repeating the same point, that he hadn't threatened her, like saying it enough times would make everyone ignore what his body was doing in real time. Janelle stayed measured. She didn't trade insults. She didn't step into him. She kept her items close and kept her words short, focused on one thing. She needed him out of her space so she could check out and leave. She said it plainly. Back up. Give space. Let her finish. Keith didn't respect that boundary. In the tight self-checkout lane, he made himself bigger, leaning in, closing distance, forcing the moment to feel personal instead of procedural. And that's when the situation stopped looking like two customers annoyed and started looking like intimidation. Then he crossed into physical behavior. He knocked or shoved some of Janelle's groceries out of the way on the counter, treating her items like obstacles instead of property. And he made quick, aggressive motions toward her that looked like he was trying to scare her into backing off. The exact thing people always argue about later, whether it counts as a swing or not, didn't matter in that moment, because the intent was obvious to the people standing there. It was threatening, it was close, and it was the kind of movement that makes a public space go silent. That silence happened. The beeps from nearby kiosks continued, but fewer people were scanning. Carts stopped rolling, heads turned fully now, not just side-eye. And the phones that were already up stayed up, because once groceries get shoved and arms start snapping towards someone, witnesses don't assume it'll work itself out. Mia, the clerk, tried to intervene again, but there was only so much she could do without putting herself in danger. She wasn't security. She was an employee stuck in the middle of a customer who wanted control and another customer who just wanted to be safe. Security arrived at the point when it mattered most. Darnell stepped in quickly and did the main thing that changes outcomes. He separated them. He put his body between Keith and Janelle, created space, and directed Keith away from her and away from the kiosk area. He didn't turn it into a shouting match. He treated it like a safety problem, because that's what it was. Keith tried to keep arguing, still denying, still blaming, still trying to make it sound like the whole thing was overreacting. But once security was between them, he lost the one tool he'd been using to control Janelle: proximity. He couldn't crowd her anymore. He couldn't loom over the counter. He couldn't force her to choose between backing up or getting bumped. Janelle stayed composed through the separation. She didn't suddenly become loud because the crowd was watching. She didn't perform. She stated the boundary one more time, simple and clear, that he didn't get to put his hands on her or touch her groceries because he was angry. That's what stuck. Because it wasn't a catchy line. It was the truth of the whole moment. With Keith moved back and security holding the space, the store shifted into procedure. The clerk focused on documenting the incident. Janelle focused on collecting her items and finishing her checkout. Keith kept trying to talk his way into being the victim, but the people around him had already seen enough to understand what actually happened. And by the time the confrontation ended inside Fresh Mart, the story was already leaving the building because the recording didn't stop when security stepped in. The recording was the reason the pressure didn't disappear. The clip didn't spread slowly, it popped. Within hours, people online were tagging Fresh Mart and asking the same question in different ways. What was the store going to do about a customer getting in a woman's face at self-checkout, knocking her groceries around, and needing security to step in? And the reason it moved so fast was simple. The video didn't look complicated. It looked like escalation. It looked like intimidation. It looked like someone trying to bully a black woman in public and assuming nobody would stop it. Multiple angles started circulating, not just one. That's when the narrative battle started. Keith began framing it online as a line issue, saying he was being rushed and disrespected, implying that Janelle had cut him. He leaned hard on technical language, claiming he never threatened her, because it sounded cleaner than addressing what people actually saw. Him taking up space, getting loud, then turning physical with her groceries. Janelle didn't do a back and forth. She posted a short, measured statement and kept it factual. She explained that his payment was already complete when she stepped up. She described the escalation, cursing, crowding, knocking items, then pointed out the key reason the video mattered, because it showed why she didn't feel safe and why security had to intervene. No insults, no name-calling, just a timeline. And while the internet argued, Fresh Mart did what it always does when a video forces its hand. It went to the systems. They pulled the self-checkout logs tied to the station. Those logs don't care who's louder. They show when the payment was approved, when the receipt printed, and when the transaction ended. They also pulled overhead footage and the self-checkout camera feed to match what customers were posting with what the store had on record. That internal review was the quiet part people don't see, but it's where accountability either happens or gets buried. Fresh Mart's first public response was careful and generic, the standard corporate language about being aware of the incident and reviewing. But behind the scenes, they were building a timeline: transaction complete, lingering at the station, escalation, security call, separation. That timeline turned it from drama online into an incident the company could act on without guessing. And once the review confirmed what the footage and logs showed, Fresh Mart shifted from cautious to decisive. They issued a formal ban trespass notice against Keith. They followed up their initial statement with clearer language about customer safety and behavior expectations in the store. Not just, "We're looking into it," but "We addressed it." At the same time, Janelle took the real-world route, not just the internet route. She filed the store incident report and followed up with a police report, because when someone's behavior crosses into physical intimidation, the record matters. It creates consequences that don't depend on a trending hashtag. Then Keith faced the part that hits hardest in modern situations like this: identification. Once people recognized him and connected a name, calls and messages started reaching the places he couldn't control. At his workplace, community circles, people who knew him in real life. And suddenly the story wasn't something he could explain away as a misunderstanding, because the evidence didn't leave room for that. Once the video spread and Fresh Mart reviewed what happened, the store moved from looking into it to action. Keith was formally banned from returning, and Fresh Mart put out a clearer statement focused on customer safety. Janelle followed through the normal way: incident report with the store and a police report, keeping it factual and consistent. And outside the store, Keith faced the kind of consequence cameras create now. Once he was identified, the incident followed him into real life. People contacted his workplace and community circles, and his denial didn't land the same when the footage and store timeline were already out there. On Freshmart's side, the main change was practical. Self-checkout staff were pushed to call security sooner when someone starts crowding, blocking, or escalating, so bagging after payment doesn't turn into another safety issue. After Freshmart issued the ban and confirmed the review, the story stopped being a viral moment and became an example. People kept sharing it for one reason. It showed how fast entitlement can turn into intimidation, especially when someone assumes a black woman will back up just to keep the peace. Janelle didn't spend weeks arguing online. She stayed consistent. She documented what happened, followed the process, and let the evidence speak. That steadiness mattered because it kept the focus on behavior and accountability, not internet drama. Keith tried to minimize it, but the combination of phone footage, witnesses, and the store's own logs made that hard. That's the modern shift. When a timeline exists, denial doesn't have much room to breathe. Freshmart also had to absorb the lesson publicly. They tightened self-checkout expectations, reinforced early security involvement, and made it clear, at least in policy and action, that customer safety comes before protecting an aggressive customer's ego. And the takeaway was simple. In public spaces, the power move is often trying to control the narrative first. Janelle didn't let that happen. She stayed calm, held her boundary, and relied on what actually works: witnesses, documentation, and follow-through. So, here's the question. If you were standing nearby, would you have recorded, gotten staff, or kept your head down and kept scanning? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who needs the reminder that boundaries matter. And subscribe for more real story times like this, where dignity holds and accountability shows up.
Hey! Step away from the vehicle now. Hands up where I can see them.
Officer, relax. I'm loading training kits and policy binders
Don't
for
talk.
a community meeting.
Step back. Who authorized you to be in this bed?
I did. I'm Assistant Chief Darnell Price.
You
My
are?
credentials are right here. I'm going to hold them steady so you can read
That's
them.
fake. People flash fake ID.
In the restricted evidence transfer bay behind Raleigh Police Headquarters, Officer Trevor Klein moved fast and loud, like he needed everyone within earshot to understand he was in control. He'd spotted a man at an unmarked department SUV, loading sealed materials into the back. From a distance, Klein decided he was watching a theft in progress. He didn't pause to verify access. He didn't start with procedure. He came in hot. He ordered the man to step away from the vehicle. He closed distance quickly. He used that sharp public tone officers use when they wanted compliance first and questions later. The man didn't flinch. He stayed calm and tried to show credentials. Klein refused to even really look, calling them fake and insisting people tried that move all the time. He treated the badge wallet like a prop and doubled down on the confrontation. And that's when the man asked for one simple thing. Something so reasonable, it should have ended the entire situation in seconds. He directed Klein to radio a supervisor and verify the plate assignment. Klein finally keyed his radio. Dispatch confirmed the SUV was assigned to command staff. The name attached matched the man standing there. That should have been the end. But Klein didn't back off. He kept pushing anyway, as if the verification didn't count, as if reality was negotiable. It wasn't panic anymore. It was ego refusing to lose in front of an audience. Then the evidence transfer bay door opened again. A veteran sergeant walked in, took one look at the man Klein was trying to bully, and froze, because he recognized him instantly. And because the sergeant understood something Klein hadn't fully processed yet. The entire exchange had been captured by a fixed bay camera, and Klein's body cam had been turned on late, but not late enough. The scene stopped being a misunderstanding in a restricted area. It became a documented test of the department's culture, recorded from multiple angles, with no room for creative rewriting later. Where are you watching from? Country, state, or city? Drop it in the comments. And if you like story times where calm professionalism meets accountability and cameras make the truth unavoidable, hit like and subscribe. Rewind. Assistant Chief Darnell Price had been newly appointed. Black, respected, and known for staying steady under pressure, he was on a tight schedule that morning. He had a community meeting coming up, and he needed to load sealed training kits and policy binders, materials meant for that meeting, into his unmarked department SUV. The evidence transfer bay was restricted for a reason. It was controlled space, documented space. It wasn't the kind of place where guesses were supposed to replace verification, but Officer Trevor Klein had been assigned to security for property and evidence transport, one of those routine enforcement roles where a person could either learn discipline and restraint or turn authority into a personal weapon. Klein saw Price from a distance and assumed suspect before he confirmed staff. And once he committed to that assumption publicly, he couldn't accept the fastest off-ramp procedure. So even after dispatch confirmed the plate and the name, Klein kept trying to force the moment to end with him winning. That's what made what happened next so important, because the veteran sergeant who walked in wasn't just a witness. He was the first person in that bay who understood how far this was about to go. The veteran sergeant didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stepped fully into the bay, looked from Klein to the man by the SUV, and the pause said everything. This wasn't some random person near a vehicle. This was Assistant Chief Darnell Price, and Klein was still acting like he had caught a thief. Price stayed calm and let the facts stay in control. He didn't posture, he didn't threaten. He repeated the same point he'd already made. The vehicle assignment had been verified, and the materials he was loading were sealed training kits and policy binders for a community meeting. Klein heard it, but he couldn't accept it, because by then the situation wasn't about safety. It was about Klein refusing to back down in front of witnesses and a camera he'd forgotten existed until it mattered. He tried to justify his behavior as doing his job, even though the job had an obvious procedure: verify before escalating. And the worst part for him was that verification had already happened. Dispatch had confirmed the plate was assigned to command staff, and the name matched. In a normal professional encounter, that's where you reset, apologize, and move on. Klein didn't reset. He kept talking like the confirmation didn't count, like the credentials didn't count, like Price's calm didn't count. The sergeant watched it happen with the kind of expression that came from experience, because he understood the chain reaction this creates inside a department. Then the sergeant did what Klein should have done first. He took control of the scene with procedure. He directed Klein to stand down. He addressed Price respectfully. He asked one more time for the basic verification points, not because he doubted Price, but because he was building a clean, professional record on the spot. And Price gave it quietly, clearly. Now the situation had 3 layers of proof: the restricted bay's fixed camera, Klein's Bodycam, late but active during the crucial minutes, and the radio dispatch log confirming the plate and assignment. Klein had no room left to claim confusion. What he had left was attitude. And that attitude, captured in a restricted area with oversight cameras, turned this from a mistake into a question people inside the building couldn't dodge. How did an officer feel comfortable treating someone like this after verification? That's where the culture issues surfaced. Because this wasn't just Klein being jumpy. This was a young officer in a control-oriented assignment, treating enforcement like confrontation, assuming suspect first, dismissing credentials, and then refusing to accept confirmed facts. The sergeant didn't debate him. He didn't lecture on the spot. He did the thing that makes accountability real in modern policing. He ensured the footage and the reports would reach the people who couldn't ignore them. Price didn't demand special treatment. He didn't need to. The evidence did the demanding. By the time Price left the bay to head to the community meeting, the incident was already bigger than the two of them. Not because anyone had posted it online yet, because inside that building, the right people now knew there was a recorded confrontation involving command staff that never should have happened in the first place. And if it could happen to a man with credentials, access, and authority, everyone understood what that implied for people who had none. Once Price left for the community meeting, the department moved into damage control mode, but not the public kind. the internal kind. Because this wasn't a complaint from a stranger, it was a recorded confrontation in a restricted bay involving command staff, verified dispatch information, and an officer who still refused to stand down. That meant supervisors couldn't minimize it without implicating themselves. Internal affairs locked down the footage quickly. The fixed bay camera was secured. Klein's body cam was pulled and flagged. Radio traffic and dispatch logs were preserved. The goal was simple. No editing, no missing files, no convenient gaps. And as soon as the clips were reviewed together, the story changed shape. It wasn't just that Klein approached aggressively. It was that he dismissed credentials, got verification, and still kept pressing, like facts were optional if they conflicted with his assumption. That's the point where it stops looking like a training issue and starts looking like a culture issue. So investigators did what they always do when a clean incident exposes a bigger problem. They pulled history. They reviewed prior complaints tied to Klein's assignment area. They looked at how evidence bay officers were trained, what they were told to do before escalating, who supervised them, what verify first actually meant in practice. They checked whether similar confrontations had been written off as routine enforcement because the targets didn't have rank, connections, or credibility inside the building. And more things started lining up. Not necessarily identical incidents, but the same pattern. Aggressive approach, fast suspicion, refusal to accept explanations, and reports that framed confrontation as good police work. The evidence bay role, which should have been about careful procedure, had become a place where certain personalities could turn authority into harassment. That's why leadership couldn't treat it as one bad moment. The problem wasn't only what Klein did, it was how easy it had been for him to do it, confidently, publicly, in a restricted space, while cameras rolled. Klein was suspended. Then the termination process began. The department couldn't keep him in that role, and after the footage, they couldn't keep him in the department without inviting a bigger fight. But Price didn't stop at discipline. He pushed for changes that made it harder for the next Klein to do the same thing. Mandatory verification steps before any enforcement action in restricted areas. Clear supervision requirements for evidence bay officers. Documentation standards that couldn't be optional. And critically, public reporting of profiling complaints so the department couldn't pretend patterns didn't exist until they were caught on camera. On the city side, a civil rights claim followed, and the city settled, because the documentation made denial expensive. And that's where the story landed for everyone watching inside and outside the department. If an assistant chief with credentials, plate verification, and command authority could still be treated like a suspect, what happened to regular citizens who had none of that protection? What made the fallout different wasn't just that Klein got suspended and fired. It was what the footage forced everyone to admit out loud. Verification had worked, and he ignored it anyway. So Price treated it like a leadership problem, not a personal insult. He didn't chase revenge. He pushed the department to close the exact gaps Klein had used. Because if those gaps stayed open, the next incident would happen to someone without rank, and it would be easier to bury. The new rules were simple and hard to argue with. In restricted areas like the evidence transfer bay, officers had to complete mandatory verification steps before any enforcement action: plate check, access confirmation, supervisor notification. Evidence-based security could no longer operate like a solo power zone. Supervision rules tightened, so a young officer couldn't escalate unchecked. Profiling complaints and outcomes had to be tracked and publicly reported, so patterns couldn't be dismissed as isolated. The city settled the civil rights claim because the documentation made the risk obvious. But the settlement wasn't the real weight of the story. The real weight was what it proved. This happened to command staff with credentials, access, and verification on record. So the question that hung over Raleigh afterward, and the one Price didn't let anyone dodge, was the same one that hit the community immediately. If it could happen to him, what happened to people with no badge wallet, no title, and no one inside the building who recognized their face. Once the policy changes were announced, the department tried to frame the incident as a one-off that had been handled. But inside the building, people knew better because the footage didn't show confusion. It showed a refusal to accept verification. That's why the reforms mattered. They weren't cosmetic. They were designed to remove the exact moments where bias and ego could hide behind "I thought" or "I felt." Price also made sure the message internally was just as clear as the policy externally. Restricted areas were not places for improvisation. The job was procedure. If an officer couldn't follow verification steps, they didn't belong in that assignment. For the public, the case became a reference point, not because it was dramatic, but because it was clean. A calm command staff member, a young officer escalating, dispatch confirming the truth, the officer still refusing to back down, cameras capturing the whole sequence. The city settlement closed the legal chapter, but it didn't erase the question the footage left behind. If someone at Price's level could be treated like that even with credentials and confirmed plate assignment, then the protection regular residents assumed existed was thinner than they wanted to believe. And that's where the story ends, right on that uncomfortable truth. Accountability didn't happen because the system was naturally fair. It happened because the system was forced to face evidence. So, what would you have done in that bay if you were Price, calm but being pushed? And what would you do as a witness, knowing a camera can be the difference between a claim and a fact? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more story times like this, grounded, realistic, and focused on accountability, make sure you subscribe.